Welcome to Private Stories, where people discover who they really are.
Daniel Carter had always been a man of discipline. He believed in structure, in logic, in the quiet strength of restraint. Emotions in his world were tools, never masters. He built his life the way an architect designs a skyscraper, every decision calculated, every step deliberate. So when his wife, Vanessa Carter, began to change, he noticed immediately. At first, the differences were subtle, almost invisible to anyone else. She stopped leaving her phone unattended. What used to lie casually on the kitchen counter now never left her hand or disappeared into her purse the moment she stood up. She began staying late at work more often, offering vague explanations wrapped in tired smiles. But it wasn't just that. Her mood became unpredictable. One evening she would come home glowing, almost radiant, her eyes alive with some secret energy. The next distant, quiet, barely speaking, as if retreating into a place he couldn't reach. Daniel didn't confront her, he observed. That's what he did best. One night, as they sat in the living room, Vanessa's phone lit up. Just a flicker of light, but Daniel saw everything. The way her fingers paused, the way she bit her lower lip just slightly, the faint smile that appeared before she even opened the message. Then she started typing, quickly, carefully, like someone who cared deeply about every word. Daniel turned his gaze back to his glass of whiskey, pretending not to notice. But inside something shifted. Not panic, not yet, just awareness. Time reveals everything, he reminded himself. And he waited. A few days later, Vanessa mentioned she was meeting her friend. "Emily," she said casually, slipping into a navy blue coat. "We haven't seen each other in forever." Daniel nodded, his expression neutral. Of course. He watched her leave, listened to the soft click of the door. Then he stood up, walked to the kitchen, and picked up his phone. He dialed. "Hey, Emily," he said when the call connected, his voice warm, almost effortless. "It's Daniel, how are you?" "Oh, Daniel, hi," she replied, surprised. "Quick question," he continued lightly. "You and Vanessa still meeting tonight?" There was a pause, a small one, but long enough. No," Emily said, confusion slipping into her voice. "We didn't plan anything. Is everything okay?" "Yes." Daniel smiled faintly, though no one could see it. "Yeah, must have misunderstood, thanks." He ended the call. That was the first real confirmation, not proof, but enough. The next evening, Vanessa stayed late again. Daniel decided to verify. He called her office. "Hi, this is Daniel Carter," he said calmly. "I'm trying to reach Vanessa." "Oh," the receptionist replied. "She actually left about an hour ago. Didn't she tell you?" Daniel paused for a fraction of a second, then answered just as evenly. "Must have slipped my mind, thank you." He hung up. His heartbeat remained steady, measured like a metronome, but beneath that calm surface something colder began to form, not anger, clarity. Over the next week the pattern deepened. Vanessa began dressing differently, more carefully, more deliberately. She spent longer in front of the mirror, experimented with makeup she hadn't worn in years. One evening she came home with an expensive black dress, sleek, elegant, far beyond what she usually considered practical. "For work," she said when she caught his glance. Daniel didn't argue, didn't question. But that night, lying awake beside her, he stared at the ceiling and let the pieces fall into place. He didn't want to believe it, not because he was blind, but because he respected her, loved her in his own quiet way. And yet, all the signs pointed in one direction, a direction outside their marriage. Daniel made a decision. He wouldn't confront her, not yet. Direct confrontation was messy, emotional, inefficient. He needed certainty, control, truth, without warning. That opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, Vanessa stepped into the shower and left her phone on the nightstand. Daniel entered the bedroom slowly. The sound of running water filled the space. He picked up the phone, locked. That alone was new, another confirmation. He placed it back exactly where it had been. Later that night, as she slept beside him, her breathing soft and even, Daniel turned his head slightly. He studied her face, peaceful, untouched by guilt. Or perhaps just well hidden. "You're hiding something," he thought. His jaw tightened. And in that moment he understood something important. He couldn't lose without knowing the truth. The next morning he made a call to someone who didn't just observe problems, but knew how to untangle them. "Mrs. Henderson," he said when she answered. There was a brief silence on the other end. "I think," Daniel continued quietly, "we have something in common." That was the beginning, not of a confrontation, but of something far more dangerous. A chain of events that would dismantle everything they once called a life and rebuild it into something unrecognizable. The cafe Daniel chose sat on the edge of downtown Seattle, tucked between glass office buildings and a quiet parking lot that rarely filled before noon. It was the kind of place people passed without noticing, which made it perfect. Daniel arrived early. He took a seat by the window, positioning himself so he could see both the entrance and the reflection behind him. A habit. Control of space meant control of information. He checked his watch once, then waited. She arrived exactly on time. Allison Henderson, tall, composed, wrapped in a charcoal gray coat that matched the sharpness of her gaze. Her blonde hair was pulled back neatly, not a single strand out of place, as if even disorder itself wasn't allowed near her. But her eyes, they carried exhaustion and something else. Resolve. "Daniel," she said, taking the seat across from him. "I wasn't sure you'd decall," she added. Daniel allowed himself a faint smile. "I don't act without reason." A brief pause. "But I believe we have a shared problem." Allison exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening slightly around her cup. "Marcus," she said quietly. Daniel didn't react outwardly, but internally the name settled into place. Marcus Henderson, her husband. "I've suspected for a while," Allison continued, her voice steady but low. "He's been distant, disappearing for hours, guarding his phone like it contained state secrets." She let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "I thought I was imagining things." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "What changed?" Allison didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and placed her phone on the table. "I stopped guessing," she said, "and started checking." Daniel looked at the screen. Messages, photos, voice notes, all of it neatly organized, too neatly. He didn't touch it right away, because in that moment he understood. Once he looked, there would be no going back. Finally, he picked it up and scrolled. The messages were unmistakable, not vague, not innocent, intimate, hungry. "I can't wait to see you tonight. You looked unbelievable yesterday. I keep thinking about you." Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then, a photo, Marcus, standing close to Vanessa, too close, her smile. It wasn't the one she gave Daniel anymore. This one was brighter, warmer, alive, like something he had lost without realizing when. A flicker of anger rose inside him, sharp, sudden, but he forced it down. Anger clouded judgment, and Daniel Carter never allowed himself to lose clarity. "I see," he said quietly, placing the phone back on the table. Allison studied him carefully. "You don't seem surprised." "I suspected," Daniel replied. "That's different from knowing," she said. He met her gaze. "Yes," he admitted, "it is." Silence settled between them, heavy, measured. Two people standing at the edge of the same collapse. "What now?" Allison asked. Daniel leaned back slightly, folding his hands. "We don't confront them." Her eyebrows lifted. "No." "No," he repeated calmly. "If we push now, they deny everything, they retreat, and we lose control." Allison watched him closely. "Then what are you suggesting?" Daniel's eyes darkened slightly. "A situation," he said. one where they have no choice but to reveal themselves. Allison hesitated. You mean a setup? Yes. That's dangerous. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Only if it looks like one. She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing not just his plan, but him. Then slowly she nodded. What do you need from me? Daniel's voice remained calm. Patience. Yes. Friday became the anchor point. The pattern was clear. Every Friday evening Vanessa worked late. And now Daniel knew exactly what that meant. That night he didn't go home. Instead, he parked his black sedan across the street from their building, engine off, lights dimmed. He watched, waited. At precisely 7:12 p.m., Vanessa stepped out. She wore a fitted midnight blue dress, elegant, effortless, and entirely unfamiliar. Her dark hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, catching the streetlight as she moved. There was a lightness in her step, confidence mixed with anticipation. A version of her Daniel hadn't seen in a long time, maybe ever. She got into a taxi. Daniel followed, at a distance. The GPS tracker he had slipped into her bag the night before confirmed the route. Downtown, upscale district, predictable. The taxi stopped in front of a high-end restaurant, glass walls, warm lighting, discreet security. Daniel parked across the street, watched. Vanessa stepped out, adjusted her coat, and walked inside. Through the glass, Daniel saw him, Marcus, waiting near the host stand, relaxed, smiling, like he belonged there, like none of this had consequences. Marcus leaned in, kissed her cheek, familiar, intimate, natural for a brief moment. Daniel felt heat surge through his body. Rage, raw, immediate, but he closed his eyes, breathed once, slowly, and the feeling passed, replaced by something colder, sharper, purpose. Inside, everything was already in motion. Allison sat at a table in the corner, unrecognizable, a different hairstyle, subtle makeup shift. Glasses she didn't usually wear, she blended in perfectly. Watching, waiting, Daniel remained outside, phone in hand. Ready, Marcus and Vanessa took a secluded table. They leaned toward each other, too close for just work, too comfortable for coincidence. Allison observed every detail, the way Vanessa touched his arm, the way Marcus lowered his voice, the way distance simply didn't exist between them. Then, the moment came. A waiter approached their table, placed their drinks down, and stepped away. Allison stood, calm, precise, and walked toward them. Marcus. Her voice cut through the space. Clear, sharp, unmistakable. Marcus froze. Vanessa blinked, confusion flickering across her face. Allison stopped beside their table, tilted her head slightly. A faint smile touched her lips. "Oh," she said softly, just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "What a coincidence." Marcus's confidence collapsed instantly. Allison, this isn't." She raised a hand, silencing him. "And who," she continued, turning her gaze to Vanessa, "is this?" Vanessa straightened, recovered quickly, forced a polite smile. "We're just discussing work." Allison laughed, not loudly but sharply enough to cut. "Work." She stepped closer. "Should I join you then?" A pause, then deliberately. "I am his wife after all." Silence, heavy, suffocating. Outside, Daniel watched everything unfold through the glass, every expression, every crack forming. Marcus tried to speak, failed. Vanessa pressed her lips together, tension tightening her face. Allison pulled out her phone, took a photo. Calmly, effortlessly. Then she looked directly at Vanessa. Her voice dropped slightly, colder now. "Does your husband know," she asked, "that you're helping destroy someone else's family?" Vanessa's composure broke just for a second, but Daniel saw it. That was enough. Allison turned. "Marcus," she said without looking back, "we'll talk at home." Then to Vanessa. "And you?" A brief pause. You should start thinking about what you're going to tell yours. She walked out, straight toward Daniel. He met her halfway. Well, he asked. Allison smirked faintly. They looked like they'd seen ghosts. A beat your move. Daniel glanced back at the restaurant, at Vanessa, still frozen at the table now. It wasn't about proof anymore. It was about timing, pressure, collapse. And Daniel Carter was very, very patient. Vanessa came home late, later than usual. The apartment was quiet when she stepped inside, but not empty. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table. A single lamp cast a soft, warm glow across the room, leaving the rest of the space in shadow. In front of him stood a cup of tea, untouched, already cold. He didn't look up immediately. That made it worse. "Hey," Vanessa said cautiously, closing the door behind her. Her heels clicked softly against the floor, each step echoing louder than it should have. "You're still awake." Daniel lifted his eyes. There was no anger in them, no shouting, no chaos, only something far more unsettling. "Control. I was waiting," he said quietly. Vanessa's chest tightened. "Waiting for what?" she asked, though her voice betrayed her. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "How was your meeting?" The question hung in the air like a blade. For a fraction of a second, she froze, then forced a smile. "It was good, just catching up, nothing special." Silence. Daniel slowly moved his cup aside, folded his hands on the table, studied her. That silence stretched long enough to make her pulse quicken. "Are you sure?" he finally asked, his voice low, steady. "You want to continue?" Vanessa blinked. "Continue what?" Daniel stood up, not abruptly, not aggressively, but with a quiet finality that made the air feel heavier. "Lying." The word hit her harder than any accusation. Her breath caught. I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly, avoiding his gaze. Daniel reached into his pocket, placed his phone on the table. The screen lit up. Vanessa's world collapsed in an instant. Messages, photos, screenshots, everything. Every word she thought was hidden. Every moment she believed was secret, laid out in front of her like evidence in a courtroom, her face drained of color. "Where did you?" she whispered. "It doesn't matter," Daniel interrupted calmly. "What matters is what you do next." Her hands trembled. She sank into the chair, covered her face. Her breathing became uneven, fragile, like something on the verge of breaking. Minutes passed. Daniel didn't rush her, didn't speak. He simply watched. She finally began, her voice barely audible. "It's not what you think." Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. "Then explain it." She looked up at him. Her eyes filled with tears, searching, desperate, but there was nowhere left to hide. "Tell me," he continued quietly, "what exactly did I misunderstand?" Silence again, longer this time, heavier then. Something inside her gave way. "Yes," she whispered. The word barely existed, but it was enough. "Yes," she repeated, louder now, her voice shaking. "It's true." Daniel closed his eyes briefly, not in shock. He had known, but hearing it. "That was different. I had an affair," she said, the words tumbling out now, unstoppable, "with Marcus." The room felt smaller, colder, like the walls had moved closer. Daniel opened his eyes, looked at her, and for the first time, there was pain, real, sharp, unfiltered. "Why?" he asked, simple, direct. Vanessa shook her head weakly. "I don't know, it just happened." "That's not an answer." Her voice broke. "I felt alone, Daniel," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You were always distant, always controlled. I didn't know how to reach you anymore." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his gaze hardened. "So this," he said quietly, "is my fault." "No," she cried instantly. "No, that's not what I mean. I know I'm bien envers I just—" She stopped herself, catching her breath. "I didn't plan it, I swear." Daniel's expression didn't change. But you continued, he said. She lowered her head. Yes. I loved you, she whispered. I still do. That almost broke something inside him, but he didn't let it. Love, Daniel said coldly, is loyalty, respect, choice. He stepped closer. You chose to destroy all of that. Vanessa stood up suddenly, grabbing his hand. Please, she begged. Give me a chance. I'll fix everything. I'll end it. Daniel pulled his hand away. Slowly, deliberately. You don't fix betrayal with promises, he said. You live with the consequences. He turned, walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there. Shaking, crying, alone. That night something irreversible happened, not just the truth coming out, but the foundation of their life cracking beyond repair. Days passed. Vanessa became quiet, careful, almost invisible. She avoided his eyes, spoke only when necessary, moved through the apartment like a guest in someone else's home. Daniel noticed everything, but said nothing. Forgiveness to him wasn't weakness. But neither was silence. He wasn't done. Not yet. A week later, he made his next move, calculated, precise. He packed a bag, called his parents, and told Vanessa they were leaving town for a few days with their daughter, Lily. We'll be back soon, he said calmly. You should use this time to think. She didn't argue. She couldn't. The door closed behind him, and for the first time, Vanessa was truly alone. The silence of the apartment pressed down on her like weight, heavy, unforgiving. She wandered from room to room, touching things absent-mindedly, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly, even though deep down she knew. It hadn't been quick at all. It had been building, quietly, like a crack in glass, until it finally shattered. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it instantly, hope flashing through her chest. Marcus. Hey, are you okay? She typed quickly. We need to talk. The reply came an hour later, short, cold. Not now, we'll talk later. Vanessa stared at the screen. Her stomach dropped, for the first time. A new fear appeared. What if she hadn't just lost her husband, but everything else too? Miles away, Daniel stood outside a small cabin surrounded by tall pines, the air crisp and quiet. His old friend, Logan Reed, leaned against a wooden fence watching him. You look different, Logan said, lighting a cigarette. Daniel exhaled slowly. She cheated. Logan paused, then nodded once. Yeah, that'll do it. What are you going to do? He asked. Daniel's gaze hardened slightly. Make her understand. Yes. Logan studied him carefully. Just don't lose yourself doing it. Daniel didn't answer, because deep down, he wasn't entirely sure he already hadn't. When Daniel returned home, nothing looked different. And yet, everything had changed. Vanessa met him at the door. She tried to smile, tried to look normal, but her eyes betrayed her. Red, tired, fragile. Hey, she said softly, glancing at their daughter Lily before looking back at him. How was the trip? Fine, Daniel replied, his tone neutral. He stepped past her. No touch, no warmth. That hurt more than anger. The days that followed became unbearable for Vanessa. Daniel spoke to her only when necessary, about groceries, about Lily, about anything except them. No accusations, no arguments, just distance. Cold, precise. Intentional. Vanessa tried to start conversations, tried to explain, apologize, but every attempt dissolved against his silence. And slowly, she began to understand. This wasn't punishment, this was erasure. Daniel was showing her a world without him in it. Meanwhile, he wasn't idle. He met Allison again, shared information, connected details, and through her, he learned something unexpected. Marcus had moved on, quickly. There's another woman, Allison said, sliding her phone across the table during their next meeting. Daniel looked down, photos, Marcus, laughing, relaxed, with a younger brunette, confident, carefree, like nothing had ever mattered. Daniel's lips curved slightly, not in amusement, in calculation. "This," he said quietly, "will be useful." That evening he came home earlier than usual. Vanessa was sitting on the edge of the bed, lost in thought. "Sit," Daniel said calmly, placing a folder on the table. She obeyed instantly, her hands trembling slightly. He opened the folder, turned it toward her. Photos, Marcus, with someone else. Vanessa's breath caught. Her eyes scanned the images desperately, as if hoping they weren't real, but they were. Her fingers tightened around the edges of the paper. "No," she whispered. Daniel watched her carefully, every reaction, every crack. "You should know," he said coldly, "who you chose over your family." Tears spilled instantly, uncontrollable. He said it meant something," she choked. Daniel didn't respond because this was the truth she needed to face. That night Vanessa sat alone in the dark. The photos spread across the bed, her world collapsing in layers. She hadn't just destroyed her marriage, she had been replaceable, disposable. And the realization cut deeper than anything Daniel could have said. Days later she finally received a message from Marcus. "Let's meet, tomorrow, 7 p.m., Riverside Cafe." Her hands shook, hope and fear twisted together inside her chest. Maybe she could fix something, understand, get closure. The next evening she stood in front of the mirror for almost an hour, adjusting her dress, fixing her makeup, trying to become the woman he had wanted, but something in her eyes had changed. Less confidence, more desperation. The cafe overlooked the river. City lights reflecting across the water like scattered gold. Romantic, quiet, perfect. Vanessa arrived early, chose a table by the window, her heart racing with every passing minute. Then she saw him, Marcus, walking in, but he wasn't alone. The brunette from the photos walked beside him, her hand resting casually on his arm. Vanessa's stomach dropped. Marcus approached the table, sat down like nothing was wrong. "Hey," he said casually, "how are you?" Vanessa stared at him, speechless. "What is this?" She finally managed, her voice trembling. Marcus glanced at the brunette, then back at Vanessa. "What do you mean?" "That," she said, pointing, her voice rising slightly. "Who is she?" The brunette smirked faintly, didn't speak. Marcus leaned back in his chair, relaxed, unbothered. "This is Chloe," he said, "my girlfriend." The word hit like a physical blow. "You're joking," Vanessa whispered. He shrugged. "Why would I be?" Her chest tightened. "You said everything you said." Marcus cut her off. "Vanessa," he said, his tone almost bored, "you knew what this was." Silence. "No," she shook her head. "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did," he said calmly. "We had fun, that's it." Her vision blurred. "You used me," she said, her voice breaking. Marcus smirked slightly. "We used each other." That was it, whatever illusion she had left. Shattered completely. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She wanted to scream, to hit him, to demand answers, but instead she turned and walked away. Outside, the cold air hit her like a shock. Her heels struck the pavement unevenly as she moved faster, almost running. His words echoed in her head. "You knew what this was." By the time she reached home, she was barely holding herself together. Daniel was sitting on the couch, reading, calm, unmoved. He looked up as she entered, took in her expression, her trembling hands, her ruined composure. "How was your meeting?" he asked quietly. That was all it took. Vanessa collapsed into the chair, covered her face, and broke down completely. Daniel said nothing because now she finally understood, and this was only the beginning of the consequences. Vanessa didn't sleep that night, or the night after, or the one after that. Her mind became a battlefield, fragments of memories clashing against reality. Marcus's voice, Daniel's silence, her own choices. She replayed everything, over and over, looking for a moment she could undo, a word she could take back, a decision she could erase. But there was nothing, because the truth was simple. She had chosen this. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed untouched, at least on the surface. He followed his routine with almost surgical precision. Work, time with Lily, evenings in his office. Vanessa watched him from a distance, like someone observing a stranger who used to be her entire world. His calmness terrified her, because it wasn't indifference, it was control. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, she finally spoke. "Daniel, we need to talk." He didn't look up immediately, finished the line he was reading, closed the file, then raised his eyes to her. "I'm listening." Her fingers twisted together nervously. "I know I ruined everything," she said, her voice unsteady. "I know I don't deserve anything from you." He said nothing. "But I need to understand," she continued, her eyes filling with tears. "Is there any chance for us?" That question lingered in the air, heavy, dangerous. Daniel stood slowly, walked to the window. The city lights reflected faintly in the glass. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "You want honesty?" he asked quietly. She nodded, barely breathing. "You destroyed what we had," he said without turning. "Not damaged, not weakened." A pause. "Destroyed." Her chest tightened, but she didn't interrupt. "You didn't just betray me," he continued. "You rewrote everything I thought was real." Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. "And the worst part," he added, finally turning to face her, "you did it for someone who didn't even value you." That hit harder than anything else. Vanessa closed her eyes, because she knew. He was right. "I can't erase that," Daniel said, silence. "But," he continued. Her eyes opened instantly. Hope, fragile, trembling, flickered inside them. "I also won't pretend our daughter doesn't exist. Lily, the one thing still connecting them." "I'm not doing this for you," Daniel said firmly. "Understand that." Vanessa nodded quickly. "Yes, I understand." "I'm giving you one chance," he said. "Not to speak, not to apologize. A step closer, to prove." Her breath caught. "If you want any future here," he continued, "you earn it." "How?" she whispered. Daniel studied her, long, carefully. "By becoming someone who wouldn't do this again." That answer wasn't comforting. It was heavy because it wasn't a task. It was a transformation. "I'll do anything," she said quickly. "Anything." Daniel's expression didn't soften. "Then start by cutting off everything connected to him." "I already did," she said. He held her gaze. "Completely." She nodded. "I will." Another pause. "This is your only chance, Vanessa." "I know." "And if you lie again—" "I won't," she said immediately, almost pleading. Daniel didn't respond, because trust was no longer something words could touch. Weeks passed. Vanessa changed, not suddenly, not dramatically, but consistently. She stopped trying to explain herself, stopped asking for forgiveness. Instead, she acted, she cooked, cleaned, spent more time with Lily, left her phone in plain sight, shared her schedule. Small things, simple things, but this time they meant something. She found a new job, cut ties with her old workplace, with every memory connected to Marcus. Every day became effort. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. He saw the exhaustion behind her eyes, the restraint in her voice, the quiet determination in her actions, but he didn't reward it, not yet, because change needed time to become real. One evening, Vanessa stood in the doorway of his office, hesitating. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Daniel looked up, nodded once. She stepped inside, fidgeting slightly with the sleeve of her sweater. "I just wanted to say something," she began. He waited. "I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "Not forgiveness, not trust. A breath, but I understand now. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. I understand what I did, she continued. Not just to you, but to us, to Lily, to myself. Her voice didn't break this time. I don't expect you to believe me, she added. I just needed to say it. Silence followed, long, measured, then. Daniel nodded slightly. Good, he said, just one word, but for Vanessa. It meant everything. Because for the first time, he didn't look at her like a stranger. Not fully, not yet, but something had shifted, something small, fragile, a beginning, not forgiveness, but possibility. A month later, Daniel sat alone in his office late at night. The house was quiet. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes. The anger was gone, the desire for revenge. Faded, all that remained was emptiness. No victory, no satisfaction, just silence, because in the end, no one really wins, only survives and maybe, if they're strong enough, rebuilds.